week in Intro to Interpreting, we learned about two different types of models done by Dr. Chazelle. I think I said that right. The efforts model and the gravitational model. The first model comes with four efforts involved with interpreting, which is listening, memory, production, and confirmation, or coordination, I'm sorry. And that just talks about all the efforts that go into interpreting itself. The gravitational model is a model that kind of looks like the target symbol, and in the middle is where you remember everything and it is accessible to you and all the knowledge. By the outside rings, it's where it's accessible, but you can't, it's like forgotten a bit, but it's still accessible to remember. And then the rest of it outside of the target is where you can't access it, or it's hard to access it. With that, it comes with 5 rules, one being centrifugal principle, and that's saying that if you don't use it, you lose it. So basically, if you don't have any stimulus from learning it, it's starting from the middle can go outwards, meaning that it'll become it won't be active anymore in as excessive can get. So, and then centripetal is the opposite, where if you use it more often and the more stimulus you get, the more it's accessible to you. The third rule is frequency of stimulation, and that's just basically what it sounds like. It's as much as you use it, that's how much you'll be able to remember it. So if you don't ever practice it or whatever, you'll probably forget it, and it'll become more of a passive thing. The fourth rule is the difference between active and passive stimulus. Active stimulus is, writing it. You remember it. You go to class. You write it down. You talk about it with your friends. You study it, and that'll make it more permanent in your mind. Whereas a passive stimulus would be, you would know it for that time period, but you wouldn't remember it later. You wouldn't get into dialogue with friends about it. You wouldn't talk about it at all. The fifth rule is the escort principle, and which also is along with the interference effect. The escort principle is as a language moves closer to the middle, other units will follow along with it. So if you understand one thing, other parts of it will come with it. And then the interference is if you're losing your language, other little parts of that will also leave with it. We also looked into the TED Talk with Deaf in the Military from Private Cadet Nolan, and he basically was just talking about his experience in ROTC and what he learned from that. He talked about how there were, in his research paper that he conducted, he found that there were a lot of deaf people in history. So like in the Civil War, in World War I, World War II, there had been deaf people that served in the military, but now if you go to a recruitment base, they're like, no, I'm sorry, you can't do it. And then he found that in Israel, they actually allow deaf people to be soldiers as well. But he basically just talked about how great his experience was, that when he was allowed to join the ROTC group at his old alumni. And that's basically what we learned this week. So, yep.